Alright, we have a 3.3 liter 2002 Xterra, non-supercharged. Situation is that there appears to be coolant leak happening down here in the lower intake manifold area. From what I've found out, as little as I found out, there are a couple of reasons why this could be happening. Something to do with the thermostat housing, because there's several hookups into it, all sealed, that could have gone bad, or the lower intake manifold gasket is leaking. Either case, the entire upper and lower intake manifold has to be removed to get at it. In the process, might as well change all the hosing that's underneath there. There happens to be quite a bit of it. So, looking through the internet and looking on YouTube, there are a few videos, but they're spotty at best to show you exactly what needs to be done and what you're looking at. Everything you actually need to see just happens to be the point of where the camera doesn't reach. So we're going to try and do it from start to finish, section by section, and hopefully give somebody else a helping hand with theirs if it comes down to it. First thing up, going to wind up disconnecting the battery, drain the coolant, then start dismantling piece by piece, and we'll be videotaping as we're going along, for your sake and mine too. So we'll go from there. Check back in after we get the coolant drained out. Okay, first issue. There's no drain cock on this radiator. So we're stuck to remove the radiator hoses to drain it. I was hoping for a nicer way to get the antifreeze out, but anyway, decided to take it off from the thermostat housing. It's a 12mm bolt right here. So, and then we're going to break the line there and drain out a little bit at a time anyway. Try not to get it all over the ground. Okay, hose is disconnected, radiator's drained. The problem is that down there, and I doubt you can see the bucket very well, there's only about a half gallon of fluid. I know the system takes 3 gallons to fill, so there's a whole bunch left inside the engine block. But there's nothing we can do about it. Just have to work our way through it. Battery's disconnected, so we're good there. The next step is remove the intake, at least the air box. Well, I don't have the stock air box, but basics are the same. Just unclamp it carefully with the flow sensor there. You don't want to jostle that around. But remove that and then we'll move on. Okay, air intake's off. Started just unplugging some of the harnessing to get it out of the way. Some of the vacuum tubes. So I did find something interesting. If anyone's got a comment on this, this was impregnated, hope you can see it, inside the PVC lines. I wonder if they're using that as some kind of filter. It's been there for 12 years. It's going back, so we'll leave that be. A little side note, we did relocate the knock sets to the top of the motor, so that makes life a little easier. When we're downside, we'll remove the old one and the old piece of harness that's still left in there. Right now, just releasing the harnessing. As we get down to it, we're going to wind up changing the valve cover gaskets too. We're going to wind up doing the whole top half of the motor, sealing it up. After 12 years, 85,000 miles, it deserves it. So that's where we're headed for right now. Okay, something else to, a little detail note that you might find useful. These are the O2 sensor lines that are tied into the main harness, strapped to it, but they're also anchored to the intake manifold piping. So those will have to be disconnected to free the intake manifold without destroying the harnessing. Okay, we're moving along. Considering the throttle body cabling, I don't suggest you break these nuts loose. Those are factory set up. Easier just to relieve the cables from their hookups to the throttle body itself and the linkages, and just peel this back out of your way. This way this leaves this free. Now we'll work on all the vacuum lining and antifreeze lines on this side of the motor, and hopefully we'll be able to start unbolting this upper intake in a little while. At least that's the plan. We'll see. Okay, upper intake is taken off. A couple of things. It's no picnic to do, but anyway, there are two hoses that go from the cooling pipe up to the intake manifold. Now if you see, that damn squeeze clamp does not come over the top. I imagine that if you push it down to the bottom and start working the hose up, you could do it. I tried for about an hour. It wasn't happening. I'm not really all that concerned about it. I'm replacing all these hoses anyway, so I just cut it. There's that one, and there's a short straight one. Let me see if I get the camera to focus on this. I don't know if you can see it or not with all the junk in the way. Oh, there's that one and that one. That's straight up and down into the intake manifold. There's also a small fuel line coming up through the back of the rail. Oh, I gotta find it. Let's see, where did it go? Where did it go? It was here. Oh Lord. Let's see, let's see. Oh wait, I know what. The short one, well, let me back up. I'm all over the place here. This short one, this is the back of the upper intake. This you leave alone. It's this one that comes up off the fuel rail line. That's why I can't find it. It's on the fuel rail. And I peeled the fuel rail back. It's this line that you need to disconnect. There were 4 6mm bolts holding the fuel rail assembly in place. You undo them and you pop out the fuel rail. That takes care of getting the fuel rail out of the way. Now, this forward, my panned in, yeah, that's why it's so tough. This forward tensioning bracket for the air conditioner has to come off so you can access the hardware for the thermostat that's underneath here. I'm hoping not to go into the timing chain cover to fool around with that. It's not really what I was looking to do, but what's going to wind up happening with all this is it's all going to be replaced brand new, so I don't have to worry about hoses, leaks, or anything else. We still haven't found the source of the coolant leak yet. I imagine once we get the intake manifold off, the lower half of it, it'll show itself. I have no doubt. So, but yeah, you do your best to basically peel the top of the motor clear. Oh, and by the way, that's the infamous number 6 plug that's always a horror to get. And it turns out they have the harnessing wrapped on either side of it, which is why it's such a horror to get into and get out of. I'm going to see if I can reroute those wires, make it a little easier. Of course, you got one that mounts on this bracket, one part of the harness that hooks into the lower intake manifold. Yeah, there are 2 connectors which are here. These you're better off sliding off the bottom of the intake manifold to get enough room to play with them, to unplug them. So we're getting there. I gotta give Eric the car guy and Brian Mobiles One a hands up. It's a lot of work. It's not easy, and you strain for it, but you get there slow and steady. Just keep persevering at it. and you will finally make it down there. Well, no, it doesn't look too bad, so we'll keep you surprised. Okay. Alright, it took me a couple of days. I'm doing this a little bit at a time considering it's like 90 plus degrees outside, but we've dug down to the bottom of the top of the engine block. Lower intake manifold is released. The first thing was to remove the thermostat housing and the associated pipe that you can see running back. And there are a couple of hoses hooked up to it. One for the heater core that's buried behind the head. I don't know if that's picking it up on video or not, but let's see if we can move this line out. That line goes up to the heater core, and the second line goes up to the upper intake manifold. Considering I was replacing all the lines, it seemed easier just to cut it, then remove the entire thermostat housing and run tube as one piece, take it out, clean it up, reseal everything brand new. There are no gaskets, it's only RTV sealant, so everything is resealed. It comes off via these two bolts down here. I mean, if you just want to remove the housing itself, you can release these two bolts back here on the flange and leave the tube intact, but considering those hoses are shot, you just pay to do it. Now, back here is the location for the original knock sensor, which I relocated to the top of the intake manifold. That's what they get you for when you got to go through to get at it. Not a pleasant sight. Anyway, the heads look really good. Intake ports are clean. Very little buildup, which is amazing after a motor that's 13 years old. And so far it's been relatively good. Your intake manifold is held by 4 6mm Allen screws on the outer corners of the unit and 4 studs located centrally. There's a specific unbolting pattern to loosen them up. I'll put a shot of the picture that shows the unbolting of them as far as that's concerned. My one problem I did run into is back here at the heater core when disassembling this whole thing, is that I found one of the plastic nipples had broken off and it was inside the hose. As soon as I get this piece off of here, I'll show you. That's what's left of the nipple. It should be another 1.5 inches longer, but it's broken about a 1/2 inch from the firewall. And I am not replacing the heater core because of that. I got a piece of hosing. It looks like I can butt it right up against the firewall and get a clamp on it to hold. So that's what we're going to do with that. Now, as far as the heads are concerned, I just pulled off one of the valve covers and, excuse the camera, they look pretty damn good. I was impressed to see how well and how clean these were. Appears to be no buildup whatsoever inside the head. Again, 13 years, I'm pretty impressed. And the inside of the valve cover looks just as clean. Let's see if we can get a decent sunshot here. Nice early morning sun. There appears to be practically zero buildup in the valve cover. So, I'm pretty happy with that. Folks, change your oil religiously. That will the #1 thing to maintain your motor. Keep it going. So the next views you'll see are the intake manifolds, upper and lower, as to what is and what isn't going on with them. But so far, right now, I'm just waiting for the gasket set to arrive, and we can start remounting this thing. Only big concern is flushing the system out, because there is no drain cock on this radiator. Looks like I'll have to fill it with fresh water and use the air compressor to blow it out. But that seems to be the biggest hassle right now. We'll see. Alright, lower intake manifold. New radiator heater hose installed on this side. Easy to do it on the outside instead of trying to squeeze your hand to get to this clamp. That'll be backed up against the firewall, the back of the motor. This port takes a line off the upper intake manifold, turns on a 90-degree from about center point of this bolt, turns down into this one. So again, she's pretty clean considering. In the order to remove this from the engine block without taking apart your entire timing chain cover, you unbolt the, and I assume this to be a radiator bypass, but it's also the where you put the upper radiator hose in. This bolts on to the front of the motor from down here. 2 bolts here and here. You unbolt that and you remove this section along with this bypass tube, bypass hose, whichever way you want to call it, and you lift it right. You remove that section, then you can lift the entire lower intake manifold quite easily. Again, here are the 2, 3, 4 on each side, the mounting bolts. Again, you'll have the 6mm Allens holding the 4 outer corners and the studs in the center. These 4 Allen screws attach the fuel injector rail to the manifold, and they just plug right into the seals right there. So the easiest thing I found, I saw some other videos where they go through the trouble of unbolting this to get the manifold out. Chances are, if you're at this age, you're going to wind up having to replace the hoses anyway. I cut the hoses, made life simple, and take it out in one piece. After it's out of the car, take this, remove the 2 bolts on the flange, take it apart, clean it, reseal it, and remount it. Now the odd thing with this, and I don't know if this is common to all Nissans, is that they use 2 different size diameter lines. This coming off the manifold is closer to 3/4, while the heater core is closer to 5/8. Evidently the hose they use flexes that much, but trying to find that hose was a real hassle. But I did manage to get 5/8 heater core line onto it, and I'm going to go with that. Make life simple for me. And the down tubes themselves, I ran the appropriate size heater line for that, and we're going to go with that. So next shot you'll see with this is going all back together step by step. Hopefully did it all right and it's going to run the way it should. Hopefully. Keeping my fingers crossed.